What's happening, y'all? Corey Buschlen of Fantasy Stock Exchange coming at you to bring you the Week 4 DFS recap. As you guys know, every Monday I bring you guys the recap of the Millionaire Maker contest on DraftKings, the Sunday Million contest on FanDuel, recap those lineups, talk about team construction, talk about some of the big decisions that they made, some of the stacks that they had, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, going over my own lineups as well, where I could have changed things and done things differently to improve my winnings as well. Of course, if you guys need any of my personal advice, you can go to the Draft Sharks website. Every single Friday and Saturday, I write a weekly GPP picks for FanDuel and for DraftKings. You guys can see some of the picks that I made this week. Definitely worked out. I picked some of the big hits, but I also picked some of the big misses. So without further ado, guys, we're going to get right into this. DraftKings lineup recap of the Millionaire Maker. You guys can see it on the screen. Jay Zincer is the guy that actually won this contest. I think the amazing thing about this guy's lineup is that he didn't have Tyreek Hill, who was, in fact, the highest scoring player on the week. This guy won the Millionaire Maker without Tyreek Hill in his lineup, which I find completely insane. Of course, having not had Tyreek Hill, he needed to have pretty much hits at every position. He couldn't afford to have anybody miss. With Cordero Patterson in his lineup, obviously, he was one of the bigger surprises. Highest scoring players on the week. Deebo Samuel, again, another monster performance out of him. Dak Prescott, Saquon Barkley. Again, you see all the fire in his lineup. He basically hit on every single pick. I think one of the interesting things that this guy did that allowed him to differentiate his lineup a lot was taking Dak Prescott and Dalton Schultz and stacking them. And I guess their draft percentage and their ownership was pretty high, but the people that had Dak Prescott, I'd imagine also had Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb. And those guys didn't have like the big blow up performances like some people might have expected for those guys. So the fact that all he got in this game was exposure to Dak Prescott, Dalton Schultz, and then he ran it back with DJ Moore as well. He got the highest 3 scoring players in the game, basically. So that is definitely, a big hit for that guy. Saquon Barkley, I cannot believe Saquon Barkley was 2.4% owned in the Millionaire Maker contest. He was a guy that was in a lot of my lineups on both FanDuel and DraftKings. So the fact that he was so low owned, I just found incredible because his workload was going up every single week. I'm kind of surprised nobody realized that and nobody really decided to play the guy. Again, Deebo Samuel, just monster performance out of him. Corey Davis, another guy that I think I hit on definitely. He was a guy that I talked about in my article. David Montgomery as well, a guy that I talked about in my article. And I also said, if you can afford the Bills defense, obviously they were the creme de la creme this week at defense because they were playing Davis Mills, who's a rookie quarterback at home. So that was obviously a good matchup for the Buffalo Bills. Also like a rain game as well. So moving from the Millionaire Maker in DraftKings to my own lineup in the Millionaire Maker. Obviously, I did not rank first in this contest, but I did come in 42,000th, I believe, which is better than I did last week when I was, I think, in like the 70,000s. The one thing that I definitely hit on, which I did talk about in my article, was a contrarian play at quarterback to me was Matt Ryan. I thought Matt Ryan coming against this Washington football team defense, you guys can see 3.8% of people played Matt Ryan. So I was definitely a good contrarian play for me. Saquon Barkley as well. I think the one thing I did with this lineup that might have, gone a little too far was that I didn't play any chalk pretty much. I played a lot of guys that weren't highly owned. DeAndre Swift was my highest owned player as well as Corey Davis at 9.9%. I think I probably could have gone a little bit more safer in certain areas because I did try and go a little too contrarian in this lineup. But when you're in contests of this magnitude, if you can hit on some of those contrarian plays like I did with Matt Ryan and I did with Saquon Barkley, I did with Terry McLaurin as well, those guys can help you get a big time advantage because you didn't play the chalky plays like Derrick Henry, for example. You didn't play the very common plays that everybody's going to have in their lineup. So the one thing I would change about this lineup, I thought the sentiment was right, stacking Matt Ryan with some of his weapons, Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts, and running it back with Terry McLaurin. The problem is, instead of playing Kyle Pitts, I should have played Cordero Patterson. That was the big problem with my lineup. If I had played Cordero Patterson instead of Kyle Pitts and then spent up at a different tight end or played Dawson Knox or Mike Gesicki or something like that, I probably would have had a much better outing in this lineup. Obviously, I still was able to double my money and make some of my money back. But either way, I think this lineup definitely could have gone better. It was a little boomer bust. I hit big on some decisions. I missed big on some decisions. So that was my one and only DraftKings tournament lineup that I did. The other lineup that I did was just a cash game. So I'm not going to recap that one here. So we're going to move on to FanDuel. And FanDuel, the Sunday Million contest, as you guys can see, this guy did have Tyreek Hill in his lineup, and he stacked him with Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, that stack resulted in about 75 fantasy points, which was definitely effective for him. He didn't choose to run it back with anybody on the Philadelphia Eagles side, aside from Dallas Goedert. He didn't play Devontae Smith or anybody like that, just ran it back with the tight end. So again, another similar build to what we saw with the guy that won the Millionaire Maker. He didn't decide to like mega stack a game or anything like that. He just took the two pieces that he liked the most, Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, ran it back with the tight end on the other side of things. And again, Saquon Barkley somehow was low owned. He was another guy that I was really on this week. He was in my article. I totally thought a lot of people were going to be on him this week, and they weren't. So Saquon Barkley, another big hit there. Cordero Patterson, again, he had him in his lineup. He had Deebo Samuel in his lineup. And again, I think similar to week 2, I believe it was, if you didn't have these blow up guys, it was pretty hard for you to make your money back. If you didn't have Tyreek Hill, if you didn't have Deebo Samuel, if you didn't have Cordero Patterson, if you didn't have some of these quarterbacks like Mahomes that had huge games, or Dak Prescott or someone like that, it was pretty hard for you to hit big on some of these lineups, because 15 to 20 points didn't really get it done when there was guys that were scoring 40 plus, basically. And Kenny Golladay pretty much and Kareem Hunt were the only guys that didn't really hit huge numbers for this guy. But he did have the Bills defense, again, another defense that really, really was worth spending up for based on what they did to the Houston Texans at home. So my own lineups on FanDuel didn't go as well as my DraftKings lineups, because I did hit my cash game lineup on DraftKings and I did hit my one tournament lineup on DraftKings, but I missed both of my FanDuel lineups. I didn't do any cash games on FanDuel. I did 2 tournaments. So as you guys can see, I kind of hit on this stack. And basically what I did was, it was like a really contrarian play. And again, I went a little too contrarian again from this stack, but it did actually end up paying off for me. The problem with this lineup was that I made the wrong decisions of where I spent up. So as you guys can see on the screen, Zach Wilson, Corey Davis, and Jamison Crowder, I actually stacked those 3 guys together. And that was a really unpopular stack, right? Less than 1% ownership for both Zach Wilson and for Jamison Crowder. Corey Davis a little bit more highly owned. But aside from that, I really thought that stack was going to pay off. It definitely did to what it was trying to do, obviously, which was get me a good solid floor. Didn't necessarily bring me a huge ceiling, but because of that stack, I was able to spend up in other areas. I just chose to spend up in the wrong areas. And one area that I did spend up in, obviously, and I ran it back in that same game, was I bought into the big dog. I spent up on Derrick Henry, who was 27.9% owned. He did have a good game, so that was kind of worth the spend up at that position. Jonathan Taylor also had a pretty good game, but here's where I went wrong, right? One of the big decisions for me this week was if I'm going to spend up at wide receiver, and I thought this was a week that was smart to do so. But the problem was I chose the wrong wide receiver. I chose Davante Adams in a couple of my lineups over Tyreek Hill, because the Philadelphia Eagles had limited Amari Cooper. They had limited a number of other great wide receivers to kind of middling performances. And I thought their defense was a lot more of a run funnel defense, maybe a little bit more stuff over the middle. So not only did this decision cost me double, because the reason I played Travis Kelce was because I thought Tyreek Hill would have a down game. And the reason I played Davante Adams was because I thought he'd have a big game and Tyreek Hill would have a down game. So this one kind of double costed me. The fact that I didn't play Tyreek Hill hurt me with Davante Adams. The fact that I didn't play Tyreek Hill also hurt me with Travis Kelce. So, big time yikes on that one for me. Trey Sermon and the Eagles defense, also not great calls on my part. But this lineup had the bones to be very good. I hit on the contrarian stuff, but I didn't hit on the easy decisions, right? I didn't play the studs that I was supposed to play. Had I played Tyreek Hill in this lineup and maybe played a different tight end, maybe TJ Hawkinson or something like that, or I just spent down at tight end and then spent up at another running back slot like Saquon in my flex or something like that, this lineup would have smashed, basically, because the money that I was afforded by playing Zach Wilson and Jamison Crowder definitely was helpful on a site like FanDuel that you don't usually need to spend down on. If you do, it affords you the ability to spend up in other areas. So moving on to my last FanDuel lineup. And again, as you guys can see, this lineup was pretty good. The problem was that I didn't have those high ceiling players. And I also kind of missed on my big guys again. You guys can see Davante Adams and Travis Kelce burned me yet again. I thought those guys were going to have phenomenal games. They did not. Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith. That was just 2 players that I was talking about in my articles. There were 2 guys that I wanted exposure to this week. They ended up paying off for me there. They definitely maxed out their value. David Montgomery, another guy that I talked about in my article, as was Jonathan Taylor. So again, the bones of this lineup were good. I just missed on my big ticket items. I didn't make the right decision when it came to Davante Adams versus Tyreek Hill. I also spent up on, not spent up in terms of money, but I ate the chalk a little bit on Odell Beckham Jr., who was 25.7% drafted. And this contest that I was in, this was not the Sunday Million, the second lineup. This was more of a smaller field GPP. As you guys can see, there was only 5,647 entrants into this contest, but Odell Beckham was a guy that a lot of people were touting as a candidate for a big game this week. I bought into it. I thought he was going to have a big game. Of course, if Baker Mayfield could throw a pass downfield. He probably would have had a very long touchdown at the end of that game. So definitely disappointing there. Again, this lineup had a lot of potential. If I made the right decisions and I spent up on Tyreek Hill instead of Adams, and I spent elsewhere, maybe instead of Beckham, I played Corey Davis or someone like that. And then I didn't spend up on Travis Kelce. This lineup could have been a very, very good and very profitable lineup, especially in a small field GPP where I didn't have to compete with a bunch of people. I still finished in the top half of this, but I could have finished in the top, 500 if I would have made those decisions correctly. So that's all, guys. Again, if you enjoyed this video, comment down below any of your thoughts. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the Draft Sharks YouTube channel if you are new to it, and go check out the website. Tons of content being pumped out there. Tons of premium analysis for those of you that are Draft Sharks subscribers. And again, stay tuned for next week when I talk about my favorite GPP plays, my favorite FanDuel and DraftKings plays, and of course the cash game plays will be up there as well. So peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.